What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about SoFi. I want to go over some of the data points, what shorts did, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So SoFi went up 1.94%. Absolutely kick-ass close. So closed at the high for 24.23. Low was 23.41. A little bit low for the volume. So 45 million shares being traded. 72 is the average. But as per usual of the volume, even though it's on the lower end, a lot of institutional transactions, which in my opinion is a lot better than focusing on algorithmic trading. So I think the algos in the broader market have started to kind of pivot towards more momentum stocks. So again, that's kind of a good thing. So you kind of avoid a lot of the crazy swings. So I think SoFi on a technical standpoint has been really pointing that it wants to go higher to that 25 plus. But interestingly enough, during the pre-market, you did have a certain level of uncertainty, and that's why you had this up and down kind of crazy motion right here. Even though a lot of that didn't come from any actual data points, largely it just came from HSBC and Bank of America. Bank of America, on a side note, has been largely bearish. I think S&P was at like 5,200, and they said to short it to that 46, if I remember correctly. But nonetheless, they are out there spreading a lot of fear because Powell is speaking at the Jackson Hole this upcoming Friday, and for the most part, I think it's fair to assume that the market's already priced in a 25 basis point cut for the upcoming September 17th meeting. And potentially they're alluding to, for this upcoming speech, if Powell does not kind of mention about a cut or anything, then it might be fair to assume that there might not be a cut. So unnecessary, just kind of fear, like I said, and I think they are both mentioning that because they probably have a financial interest in the market going down, in my opinion. But F both of those, HSBC and Bank of America, and honestly, SoFi just went up and up, and as well, most of the market did as well. So pretty good to see. When it came down to SoFi, there was no news. There was a couple Form 4s that was just submitted after hours. One was this, so Eric, we already knew about this one right here, so that was submitted through that 144 yesterday. So this one just shows RSU, 55,000 shares was acquired, and then you did have a run, and so this one was 45,000 shares was acquired through RSU. So again, pretty good stuff. Nothing crazy, no real reason to buy SoFi or sell because of this information. And even these transactions that were posted yesterday through the 144s, they were transactions and selling because of tax purposes. So nothing really crazy. One thing I do want to bring up, which was rather interesting, is looking here at shorts. So shorts actually didn't do all that much. This is probably the most tamest that they've been in a very long time. So they did return about 5,000 shares. That is it. So kind of interesting, but there's one thing I want to draw to your attention. Most of the time I always bring up cost to borrow minimum being negative, and that does mean that broker or multiple brokers are paying people to short SoFi. It's not really crazy, like a big deal, because this is an annual rate. So negative 0.22% is like a penny. But still, I think it's kind of the purpose behind it. But now you actually have cost to borrow average. So that means there is a lot of brokers physically paying people to short SoFi. Again, it's still a low amount, a low percentage, so it's not that big of a deal, but it goes to show that there is more of an orchestrated type of manipulation against SoFi. So you never know, you might see shorts wake up a little bit, and as I've mentioned in my video yesterday, out of this whole week, I think Thursday, that is the day that potentially shorts might wake up again. So maybe this is in preparation for Thursday. Again, just kind of trying to piece some things together. So something to keep in mind. One thing I do want to start bringing up is the flow. So the daily flow. And so you can kind of see some large institutions did kind of get out a little bit, so midway throughout the day. But for the most part, you did have a lot of big transactions kind of moving up. And you had, for the most part, this is kind of the layout. So the inflow, outflow, this S right here. So even though essentially I did bring up how of the volume, it was on the lower end, a lot of transactions, doesn't mean algos weren't involved. This S right here is kind of a combination. So it's a smaller transaction. So that is including algorithmic trading and also retail. So within there, it's kind of both. So pretty good breakdown. So you did see still algos fairly active active for the most part, but clearly they weren't trying to manipulate or do anything overly crazy. So again, I'm going to start bringing that up as more of an additional tool that you guys can analyze and do whatever you want with. Based on today, 33 million in calls, 5.6 million in puts, and then 45% of all the options being done were bullish in nature. So despite everything, you actually still do see big money seeing more and more upside, and that I think has to do with more of the technicals. From the bulls standpoint, you see a consensus for it to be roughly around that $25 to $26 range by the end of this week. So definitely a lot of optimism for it to continue to move on higher. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 22.50 to 23. So given everything, there's still a lot more upside. And I know I bring that up almost every video, that there is more upside, but that's just plain reading the data. So it's kind of funny how bears, like, they keep thinking that it's going to stay flat at best, but it just keeps on moving higher and higher. Like I mentioned though, there was a lot of big transactions near the market close, even after hours right here. So these are all the transactions on the dark pool. So 1.5 million, 8.3. Secondary market though, this was a little bit more interesting. So 1.06, 1.6, 5.5, 24.2 million. So that's something definitely is interesting. And normally for it to be 999,000 shares, that is a hedge fund, most likely, in my opinion. And then this one right here, 16.9 million, 1.9, 1.4, 6.5. So unless some company did unveil their earnings that maybe has some correlation and effect on SoFi that I'm not aware of, SoFi, clearly big money is anticipating a big move tomorrow. And I think in general, a lot of that has to do with this. So with it closing at 24.23, I'm looking at the 4-hour chart on a side note, as you can kind of see right over here. So 4-hour chart, 24.38. That is going to be that key breakout. So I don't know if big money is assuming that tomorrow it will break above that. And if so, then you can anticipate that $25, $26 range. Elliott Wave Technicals did adjust, so now it is projecting for it to be around that 26.50. So even more upside is anticipated. So maybe big money is kind of betting that is going to occur. And actually going back even to the options, that's what the bulls are anticipating as well. So yeah, pretty exciting times. Most likely what I do estimate is going to happen is more and more chains is going to open up. And I do believe that they recently opened up the 38 to 40, but if let's say it does get to that $25, $26 range, then I can see them opening up to that $45 range. So market makers do see the possibility of this actually being hit by, let's say, 2026 or potentially even 2027. So yeah, big things are coming for SoFi, and patience finally is paying off. I've been covering SoFi for a very long time. Kind of had these breakouts to $10, back down to $6, $10, back down to $6, and finally it is at that $24 range and potentially going to be, who knows, maybe at 27, 28. No other articles really coming out associated to SoFi, so it's just been largely piggybacking off the broader market. A lot of institutions have been silently buying it though, so it'd be interesting to see the transition from Q2 to Q3 from institutions and what they did. So even quarter over quarter, they did increase their position by 19.65%. So that's going from Q1 to Q2. So given everything, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another double-digit growth going from Q2 to Q3. But nonetheless, on the actual chart itself, though, there's not really much negatives to bring up. As I've mentioned in the last couple of videos, only negative is potentially it being rather overbought. But then again, like most of the market is. So this is why Thursday, as I explained in my video yesterday, potentially it might be that kind of kryptonite for the market, hit a lot of the kind of hot topics that we have been really ignoring. So that might cause some kind of volatility. And so once again, stochastic RSI might reset itself potentially if we have a pullback, let's say Thursday, Friday. But who knows? Maybe if the data does come in, a lot of that flash data, and Walmart doesn't give more doom and gloom type of future guidance, then the market will keep on moving higher. So yeah, we're in a very unique circumstance that the market is still moving higher in optimism over rate cuts, and there's not really much negatives to really bring up. So yeah, pretty good stuff. Good time to be an investor. So let me know your viewpoint on SoFi. Have you been buying? Have you been selling? What have you been doing with SoFi? And then one final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you are looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.